are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we're about how Autodesk tailored their training for a global workforce and what they've been doing to prepare managers to be successful in a global setting. My name is Rick Lepsinger. I'm the President Managing Partner of OnPoint Consulting, and joining me today is Harry Rittenberg. He's the Senior Manager for Human Resources and Learning and Development. Harry's going to share his personal experience in transforming Autodesk training and development process. So Harry, thanks very much. I really appreciate you joining us today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Let me just take a moment to talk a little bit about OnPoint. We're an organizational and leadership development firm. We work with a number of global brands, Autodesk being one of them, and we have published a number of books in the area of leadership and organizational effectiveness. One of them is Virtual Team Success, which is a practical guide to working and leading from a distance. We also offer services and products in four main areas: identifying and developing leaders, enhancing the performance of virtual teams and virtual team leaders, enabling managers to be able to work more effectively in a matrix and on multifunctional teams, and helping organizations translate strategy and strategic initiatives into results. And Harry, why don't you give us a little overview of Autodesk for those who may not be familiar with the organization?
Okay, thank you, Rick. Welcome, everyone. Really appreciate being here. So I work for Autodesk, which we are a leader in, we're a software development company, and we're a leader in 3D design, engineering, and entertainment software. It was founded in 1982. We have headquarters in both San Rafael and San Francisco, California, so we're in Northern California, the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we do is we develop 3D design tools for professionals and for individuals. And by design tools, it could be people who are, sort of designing products, designing, civil infrastructure, buildings, architecture, engineering, construction, also product design. But we also have software that we develop for movies, for 3D movies, and for game designers. We are a very global company. We have about 120 offices in 60 countries worldwide. We have about 9,500 employees globally, so a lot of people don't know still who we are, although we're trying to get out there more and more in terms of our brand. But our 3D movie and entertainment software has won the last 15 Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects. So when you see a movie with great visual effects, usually it's our software that the graphic designers are using to create those images. And recently, we were also named in the top 10 best global companies to work for. So that's who we are.
Great. Harry, thanks very much. And it's interesting about the visual effects. I got to pay more attention to that when I'm looking at the movies.
Yeah.
The agenda for today, just to kind of give you a little sense of what we're going to cover, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the trends that are influencing training and development today, and then I'm really going to turn it over to Harry, who's going to take most of the time and talk a little bit about Autodesk, the challenges they faced in being able to provide training and development to their global and geographically dispersed population. Talk a little bit about being able to leverage technology and what you can do to take advantage of technology. Harry will talk about the pros and cons of the various approaches for delivering training and why some of them work better in certain situations. And then Harry will sort of close it with key lessons that he learned as he took on this particular challenge. And then we'll leave it open for some questions at the end. For those of you, and we're going to hold questions until the end of the session. So if you wouldn't mind, you can input your questions in the question box while we're waiting, and then we'll take a few at the end as well. So let me start off by talking a little bit about some of the trends and also why this whole topic around training and development is so critical. And here, as many of you do know, it is a key factor for employee engagement and for attracting and retaining key talent. This seems to be particularly true for the millennial population that's entering the workforce and has been in the workforce for a number of years now. Recent global Gallup poll found that among the millennial population, 87% say that professional development is very important to them. And I think we do know that in the general population, whatever generation you happen to be, this idea of opportunities to develop, to learn and grow is a key factor in retention and satisfaction overall. So there are three key trends right now that seem to be influencing the development community. The first is personalization, this whole idea of being able to access information when you want it, wherever you happen to be, and to be able to have more say in what it is you actually focus on and what you actually learn. The second is around the increased importance of demonstrating an ROI. And human resource organizations, training and development organizations have a little bit more pressure now to be able to demonstrate that there's an actual return on the time and money that's being spent on training. And the third is the advances in technology and its impact on being able to distribute, deliver training products and services in a number of different ways. And this whole notion of being able to do blended learning, cloud-based learning, mobile learning has all become a key factor and a key part of the training and development community. So let me turn it over to Harry to talk a little bit about some of his challenges, how he dealt with that, and also responded to some of those trends overall. So Harry, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Rick. So really at the time, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard somebody. Well, at the time that I met Rick and the OnPoint team, Autodesk was really going through a major change in the organization. We were acquiring developer resources overseas at a pretty fast rate, especially in China, Singapore, India, and we've already had development resources in the UK and Australia. Autodesk does acquire technologies. We acquire organizations large and small that contribute to the key mission that we have, and because of that, we find ourselves having people in very, very different places around the world, whether it's in Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, Latin America, etc. So what was happening is that more and more, I was finding out that managers were really challenged with managing more of their team members remotely. We didn't really have those kinds of skill sets for managers at that time because most of the development resources, their team members were co-located here in California, or if they were remote, they were at least maybe in another part of the country. But now we're talking about not only different time zones, but different cultures, different ways of approaching work, different ways of being accountable, building trust. All of those different things were really hitting managers pretty in the, let's just say, up front and close. And they were really looking for help in sort of closing that skills gap around how do you have remote teams and work effectively. So you can go to the next slide, please. So just like I mentioned, before that time, the bulk of our learning offerings were also classroom-based, mostly in our headquarters, maybe some overseas in the UK office, but with every acquisition, we're having more people spread around the world, and mind you, our sales organization was well into virtual and online learning, but a lot of that was mostly focused just on product training and sales certification for the thousands and thousands of resellers that we needed to support to sell our product. So at that point in time, we also had we sort of had a homegrown learning management system, which really was designed mostly to support our classroom-based training. But we were really faced with the need to scale and to begin to seriously explore both virtual and online offerings with, and we, to get really started to understand how do we scale. And so since then, we have moved to a third-party learning management system provider that we now share with the sales organization as now a truly enterprise-level system. And that allows us now to offer classroom, virtual, and online, really with a much more robust technology to provide access to everyone in the company around the world. And we do now still continue to manage these multi-channel delivery approach. We do have all three that we have in the mix. So you can go to the next slide. So when I realized I faced a few of the challenges at the same time, namely growth in virtual teams, scaling to more employees in more countries around the world, I really needed to start somewhere. We really weren't set up or equipped to deal with that. Mostly, again, classroom-based co-located learning. So, so the first thing we had to do is we had to learn how to use the technology we had to scale up and to deliver new virtual and online offerings. So one of the things that we did is we started with a new face to our LMS. So we had our own learning management system, which was sort of a registration system, but we put sort of a website on top of that which interacted with that. And I redesigned that internal learning and development website to really help employees find what they needed when they needed it. We in the company have a set of leadership competencies that all employees are expected to follow as they do their work. Employees and managers develop individual development plans to plan ahead for the training that they need as the business changed. So I mapped all of our offering to those competencies. So when employees were putting together their plans based on those competencies they needed to focus on during the coming year, they could go and choose a competency and they could see which courses we offered were aligned with those competencies. In essence, that website became a tool for individual learning planning as the way we set it up. And it turned out to be very successful because either people were looking for training and looking at what competencies were aligned to that to see if it fit with their individual development plans for skills that they needed for the coming year, or they would look at a competency and find the different offerings that were there. So it was really up to, so we really kind of put the accountability of choosing the best learning path, not by virtue of what we thought, but by virtue of what the individuals thought that they needed. So specifically to the challenge of virtual teams, I knew we had really no offerings, and this was a real gap in our curriculum, which I needed to fill. So I did quite a bit of research on vendors who focused on this area, and I especially looked for vendors who were really research-based, who did the research first, and then developed the curriculum based on that research. And that's where I came upon the book, which you saw, Virtual Team Success. I read it and I felt it was a very good approach, mostly because it had very, very practical approaches to each of the different challenges that virtual teams faced. And that's what I needed, is because Autodesk is a culture of pragmatism. We don't learn for learning's sake. We learn in order to be more effective in what we do as individuals and as a company, which hopefully translates to the way we develop our products and the way we work with our customers. So based on that, I reached out to Rick to understand what OnPoint had to offer. So at first, it was only classroom based. We actually there was a leading from a distance and collaborating from a distance with the two courses they had, one for managers, one for individual contributors. And usually what I do is I pilot something first. I just don't go full bore out there because I just don't know if we'll get the ROI from the investment that we made. So I saw that this was really the best content for us. But interestingly enough, we had these two virtual classes, the content on virtual management and virtual collaboration, but we did a pilot as a classroom-based training to test the content, and it was very well received, but again, it didn't answer the challenge of scale in the virtual realities of a remote workforce. So what Rick and I decided to do is we decided to turn this course, this classroom-based course, into a virtual one. So before we discuss how we re-architected the content, the first order here was which technology to use to conduct the training. Well, luckily, OnPoint already had an account with WebEx, a web conferencing service, which worked out really fine for us. We were, thankfully, Autodesk is open to employees using the technologies they need to get the job done. In some companies, you do have IT organizations which are really quite locked down to specific technologies that you'll need to check in your own specific situations, which sort of web conferencing technology is approved and which are not. So interestingly enough, with our new LMS implementation, we now had access to was a great platform for delivering training. Learning technology group did a nice job of integrating it with the LMS, so that when you sign up for a class, you get signed up for the virtual class, take the virtual class, and what it will do is it will track of your attendance time, and it will automatically record completions and put it on people's training records. Next slide, please, Rick. So I spent some time on this already, but having an LMS really helps in many ways to set it to scale to a global audience, because it gives access and visibility to all of the same offerings in the system. This also provides a standard experience across the world, which makes everyone feel like they work for one company. And having our sort of redesigned website on top of the learning management system really, really helped in how we organized, how we provided accessibility to that content. So I've worked places where I've worked in other places, not in Autodesk, but other companies where there were multiple LMSs. And that got pretty confusing, and it really sort of denied, if you will, accessibility to all employees to other content that companies are doing, and that kind of limits career development, if you will, for those who are curious about maybe looking at other opportunities in the company itself. So we moved to a centralized enterprise implementation where people really feel it's one system, where they were feeling sort of disconnected before. So all of the points here are advantages LMSs bring to organizations. Managing content, maintaining catalogs based on division or content area, all make access to learning prevalent and global. But a word of caution, though, is that you should really choose your learning management system wisely if you're thinking about it. There are many players out there, and really one size does really not fit all. You need to get a good sense of what you require, and pick the right learning management system that supports your requirements. Which some people, sort of back-ended, where they choose the LMS and try to fit their requirements into it. Best to come with a really good set of needs that you have in terms of the organizations you support, the type of user experience you want for employees, the ease of use of the back-end administration. So the more clear you are right from the start in order to choose, it'll help you get there and choosing the best one. It's a big investment of time, of money, and human resources. Much, and get it right as closely as possible right in the beginning. Okay, next slide, please. So we'll get to virtual instructor-led programs. Adobe Connect is a web conferencing solution. It's a solution, but there are so many others out there. Again, you have to choose the one that really works for you. But with the reason we use this is because our sales training organization has already integrated closely to our LMS, so it made it easier for us. But the system itself, but what's great about these kinds of services used before, well, Rick used WebEx, and now we're using Adobe Connect, is that you can really engage participants in very many different ways, because there are things built into it, into this thing that includes polling or use of whiteboards, and especially the use of breakout groups. And using breakout groups, which means you can actually group small teams of 2 or 3 people to have their own conversations during the virtual class, and then you could bring them back to the larger group where the facilitator can really debrief them. The more that you can replicate those characteristics of face-to-face training in terms of engagement, in terms of involving people and get them not to just be observers, but also to be active participants in the content, that's what makes, I believe, a very effective virtual program. So Rick and I worked closely together in designing the online version of the course. And at first we had a longer course. It was lasting about 2.5 hours. But when we looked at the feedback, and that would lasted for quite some time, we were looking that people were pressed for time. Change is happening so fast. The urgency to get things done doesn't leave as much time for learning as we would like it. But if we make it effortlessly accessible to people, they will take the time because it is important for them to learn. So we started with this 90-minute series, this 2.5-hour series, but then we really divided up the content into 2 separate courses, 2 separate topic areas, if you will, of the same course. So we allowed people to pick and choose the topic that they wanted, and really brought it down to a 90-minute program, also very interactive, that so far has worked really, really well. I think we've been working with Rick now for the last 4 or 5 years, and this is still going on. So, so it looked like that design worked really, really well. Um, so here's the course that has been very successful with us in our partnership, Leading from a Distance. And you can see the things here that are very important for managers. And again, this is all based on research. So these are the topics that we landed on: managing accountability, coaching from a distance, building trust virtually, conducting effective virtual meetings, influencing remotely, managing conflict in a virtual setting, and how great leaders motivate and inspire virtual environments. These are something that has really resonated. And again, we've broken this topic list up into two discrete courses that we now will have been delivering online in a virtual class. So e-learning, that's different, as you know. Virtual courses are live, same time, different place. Sort of kind of venue where there is live interaction, there is engagement between people and between the facilitator. Our e-learning courses are solely pretty much online, meaning anytime, any place. And that's been really the biggest single investment we've made in being able to scale, which is our online learning offerings. One thing I learned about this is to be very selective and very targeted with your offerings. Before I was given accountability for our learning technologies at Autodesk and in our HR community, our department had a contract with a vendor that had hundreds of choices, way too much for what we needed, nor could we do very much with it. And because there were too many offerings, it actually reduced the number of users engaging with it. Courses were in different interfaces, formats, and quality. So I basically decided to end that contract and completely review what was needed within Autodesk. And so after researching a number of vendors and understanding internally what the needs were of our managers and our employees, I landed on the Harvard Business School's Harvard Managed Mentor online library. They have 44 modules that go deep and wide on a limited number of skills that are very, very focused on manager and even employee success. And after looking through our own set of competencies, which are like some key drivers, so these are key drivers of behaviors that we want employees and managers to have, I mapped those to what the Harvard content was. And I decided to only license just half of what they had, just 22. Which was a cost saving for us, but was a much more manageable list of content to be available. So I managed to align the modules to our competencies and work really hard to really integrate those modules, not just as here's just an online offering, go get it when you want it, but really taking that content and integrating those modules into other programs that we offer. I do a lot of offsites. I do a lot of workshops for intact teams. I bring in those modules and those contents and those worksheets, work tools that go with it, into actual practice within intact teams or organizations. The one thing that is a differentiator about Harvard Management or from other topics from other vendors is for each module they have a facilitator kit so that you can do a lunch and learn. Not to be a salesman for Harvard, but what those components did for me is to allow me to really integrate and drive this content into the organization because we had so many different ways of supporting it. So as a result of the success of that, and we'll talk about statistics in a little bit in terms of what impact that made on our organization, we also now license OnPoint's working in a matrix environment online course because that has served as a gap to some of the business challenges that we didn't have any offerings for. So we licensed that, and now that's getting taken up pretty too because again, matrix environments, virtual teams is still something that's it's almost a way of life now. So the more that we can support those with skill building, the better. So as a result of instituting the online course, our active learner base really keeps doubling every year. And this is really without any, constant marketing. We don't really need to do that. So the great idea, and we also do some custom in-house modules too, as it says here, which we've made people very comfortable in accessing and taking all these courses, whether it's in-house, whether it's OnPoint, whether it's Harvard. We've been very, very, very successful in integrating it into our learning culture. Okay. So, of course, we still have face-to-face training. We have quite a bit of it. Because when it comes to soft skills and interpersonal skills, there really still is a desire for people to get together, meet each other, and learn together face-to-face. In our Asia offices, especially in Singapore, Shanghai, and Australia, I've delivered these courses in a classroom setting, and there is a high demand there. And especially with intact groups, who are my clients as an OD specialist, I still am able to do smaller versions, workshops within those organizations. I've had the opportunity of delivering critical skills in all of these three formats now. So we talked about virtual, we talked about online, we talked about traditional face-to-face. That's what we do now. That's part of our portfolio. And so they all have their place in employer learning styles, time to invest in learning, and in training budgets. So I believe we've kind of found a good balance between each of them. And you can see some of the topics here. Can you just go back for a second? You can see some of the topics here where I do, as an OD specialist, in critical thinking, managing accountability, influencing with impact, building trust, where there are really sort of interpersonal skills, soft skills, if you will, are very, very important to the business. That's how we get there, and that's why they become so popular, and also for the opportunity for people to know. Okay, so so some of the results. So over time, what we've realized, certainly in the online courses, that our active learner base has been doubling every year. We started a pilot about 4 years ago with 500. Literally has been doubling. We're up to 2,500 active learners. By active learners means that 87% of them are going to our courses and using them on a regular basis. I feel pretty proud of that because there aren't many places that could say that, but really the results of all of the integration, of all of driving it into different programs, different ways of getting the content out there, making it more practical and on the street level, if you will. That's why I think we've gotten such credibility in the offerings that we have right now. Okay, so so just this past year, I looked into our data from our learning management system. We have about 35 courses that HR itself. This is not, there are other divisions that also offer their own courses, but for us, around 155 classes. I would say that's probably even a little bit lower, and because we, including the virtual leadership training. So we have quite a bit that we put out there that is all globally accessible. So we do have face-to-face in courses in APAC and in Europe and in the US, but we really have gotten a lot of traction because of our virtual and our online courses too have really brought up our user base. So in terms of the numbers, we've had about over 1,400 learners attend one or more of these classes in the past year. Now, really, I think a lot of that statistic is around our classroom and virtual. But if you add the 2,000 active learners that we have for our online offerings, I would say we're almost double that number. So I would say 30% of our workforce taking advantage of our content year after year is at any one time. I think is impressive for my own self. I don't know about out in the rest of the world, but I think we have a lot of usership, which is really, really great. Next slide. We do have an annual employee engagement survey, which asks about a lot of different things: manager effectiveness, leadership, inspiration, growth and development, proud to be part of the company, etc. But one of the areas that we really focus on as an L&D team is about growth and development, and that people have and get the training that they need to do their job. And so over the past 5 years, we've been noticed that the results have steadily risen by a few percentage points year over year around the growth and development questions about getting the training they need to do their job and for helping their career overall. So very positive. So we have some tangible results. So some of the lessons learned. So we went from about sort of a large disparate set of offerings, and I scaled it all back to just a critical few. And I made choices based on the business challenges managers and employees were facing. Then I really drove the visibility and the integration of those online offerings. I also recruit our HR business partner community to help us drive it into their client organizations, even to the point of having them deliver maybe lunch and learns on some of these content, or just making sure that people go to the right training for the right reasons. So starting small really provides a focus. It provided a focus for our department and for the learners in the company. From there, given the success we had with Harvard Managed Mentor, with OnPoint, both virtual and online, we were really able to serve the gap where we didn't have offerings before. And the success of them, of the Harvard Managed Mentor also made it easy for me to justify the licensing of OnPoint's curriculum. I don't have to do these days a lot of justification as long as I can prove that a content area is filling a gap. I usually get support for moving it forward. So if you go to the next slide, in terms of evaluating our training content, this is more about what you as learning and development leaders should consider. To be clear about why you need the content, what business challenges are they addressing? Then addressing to what extent do you need to scale your offerings? What type of learning venues do you need to offer? What can your budget handle year after year, given that hopefully these are long-term decisions? You don't want to make a decision of getting something really popular in 1 year and just find out that you don't have budget for it the next year and you have to cancel it. So we started small, we stayed small, we used the opportunity to fully integrate what we have into as many aspects of the business as possible. And really, again, this has shown some great acceptance and usability rates that I've seen in many places. So some of our criteria in terms of how I choose new course offerings, one, that it needs to be research-based. In other words, it needs to have proven itself to be effective with, with other people, other groups, and other venues in terms of the skills that we're looking for. It needs to be cost-effective, of course. Within HR, we have a chargeback model. We're a decentralized training at Autodesk, so we have to self-fund, if you will, through the offerings that we do through our vendor classes that we charge for. So we need to make it cost-effective. It needs to be practical and actionable. People need to be able to use what we are training them to do as quickly as possible. And of course, we need to scale it worldwide. And we do ask vendors to customize to our needs. Every organization has its own culture. It has its own unique, I guess you could say, nuances that need to be things. So customize it because really one size doesn't fit all. When you have case studies that reflect internal situations and challenges, which is really the main part of our customization, is with the sort of the case studies and examples. It becomes less of a training course and more of a workshop where people are engaged and they can apply the skills directly to their jobs. And people's time is a premium at Autodesk, so if we can make it shorter and to the point, more likely people will participate. Okay, so making training engaging. Engagement is just given as part of learning theory. People will engage when they see that there is a need and that there's a practical answer to some of the issues that they have. So I look for online content that makes you work, that gives you activities. For virtual classes, I look for designs that really get people talking and engaging with each other. It really does make a true difference in the processing and retention of knowledge and skills. And here are just some of the things that we do using polls, chat, breakout groups, Q&As. All of those are things that help people get engaged. Okay. Next, using the right format. Well, this was key to the success and scaling our offerings. Focusing on the virtual class, we originally had it as a classroom-based training. When it was difficult for people, of course, to get to class, we came to the realization of why are we teaching about virtual teams in a co-located classroom situation. So this happened early on, and when we turned the course into virtual offerings, it has been, it still is around to this day. It just makes common sense to really pick the format. Online is good for some basic knowledge acquisition, but virtual and classroom is more about exercising that content and really processing it and integrating it into the work that you do. So don't assume that online is going to get the same effect as virtual or classroom, or vice versa. Okay. Face-to-face learning still a big part of us, and it's a big part of us. I have to say it's from my perspective, because in human resources, we really don't teach like technical software development skills, etc. There are other groups that do that. What we do is we provide skills for behavior change, behavior modeling, really skills for working with other people, working within teams, making good decisions, etc. So, but it also facilitates really networking, building relationships between people. That is part of our culture. We have a very collegial culture. sort of consensus-driven culture, it's about relationships. It is really about as much who you know as much as it is what you know. So there really isn't a whole lot of technology required for that, but it has to be in a classroom, that can accommodate, so it can be costly for geographically dispersed population, but that's why we make decisions about what face-to-face to get the best return on investment for that things. And yeah, it lacks flexibility in terms of place. We do, people do have to travel to it, but if it's important and it's a good investment from the team level, from a manager's level, people do it. For the virtual led program, the virtual workshop Rick and I designed was one of the first when it came out to training in our company. So for some time we had some virtual courses, but they were really mostly focused on like office skills, namely Outlook and Excel. But what set this apart from our previous experience is that the content and the approach was focused on some interpersonal skills and the need to process that content together as a group, much like a classroom version. That means there was a need to design it in such a way as to encourage engagement. So using the web conferencing, applications, having the ability to create these small breakout groups and tools for facilitating the poll, and etc., really, really made a big difference in its success. What I believe made this course last so long was that when we cut it into 2 shorter sessions, people were able to take the time to go through it and pick the skills that they wanted to learn specifically. So not, I'm going for this one skill even though they're teaching me 2 different ones. I may not be interested as much in one as the other, but really to give them that choice. And that the cost was at really a price point that managers didn't feel that were hitting their budgets, to pay to send their people to the virtual courses because the price reduction was so dramatic. So we learned quite a bit from the experience, and then we'll replicate it over time with other vendors where the training is appropriate for that type of venue. And finally, for our self-guided e-learning, I've already covered the success of what we had with our online learning, but being focused and using the content and really integrate it with the business challenges so that enter other programs when you champion with your HR community to use it, to sort of market it, to actually reinforce it through maybe some lunch and learns, it really does have an impact. So, we don't fill up our library with bulk because, you need to just really target carefully. I was at a forum not too long ago that focused on what they call the digital learner. And there were a couple of things that really came at me from that as a best practice that other organizations are using, which is called effortless accessibility and effortless consumability. So the more effortless we can make to our employees and managers, the more it's going to be used. The more people will know that it'll become second nature to go get it. Effortless consumability, that's about how we sort of pack the content into very consumable, if you will, I won't say bite-size, it's hard to make a metaphor for that, but, in just enough time and information that's needed for someone to take that information, process it, and then begin to practice it and integrate it into their own work style. So I think that's really about it. I think I'm going to turn this back over to Rick.
Okay. Harry, thanks very much. Again, it's a great story in terms of what you've done to be able to prepare your leaders to be able to succeed in a global environment, and how you've been able to make that information and those skills available to them. So we're going to open it up for questions in just a moment. We had a few questions that were sent during the registration process, and if any of you have questions, please just type them into the question box. But you heard Harry talk a little bit about how we partnered together, and what I'd really like to do is kind of invite you all to either visit our website at onpointconsultingllc.com. We have a lot of information and training resources that are actually free in our blog and other places like that. Or please feel free to contact us to talk a little bit about the challenges you're facing and how we might be able to be a resource to help you address those challenges as well. In addition, for everybody that's on the session today, you're going to get a copy of this deck, and in the deck you'll be able to take a free virtual leadership assessment. It's our online assessment. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how detailed you get in responding to the questions. But at the end of this simulation, in the beginning, you'll be dealing with real-life scenarios that are faced by virtual leaders. You'll be asked how you would handle them. And then at the end, you get a customized scorecard for how well you did. So you just have to click on the link, and it'll provide you access to our free assessment. So I think we're ready for questions. John, any questions coming through, or any questions you have for Harry?
We do have a few. How did you get your senior leadership support for this transformation?
Well, by senior leadership, I'll start with my own manager. So he's the vice president for learning and development in the HR community. Well, first of all, part of it was based on informing them of the needs and the business challenges that I was hearing, and noticing the gaps that we as a learning organization did not have to serve our population. So based on sort of our mission and our vision of providing access and effective learning materials to make people more effective, to make managers and teams more effective, here was a gap that that was noticeable. So I told him that I was going to go and research some of the best applications we can for that. And then when I found it, I went back and talked about what was the tenets, what do we think we were going to get out of it, how were we going to be serving our population. So I was given support, so just like bits by bits, almost step by step. So I got support to bring in the content, I got support to create a pilot and to actually do the pilot, then going through the evaluations and showing that there was efficacy in the training. Then I got support to then go to a virtual level. And then after we got it out there and people started using it, it kind of vouched for itself. But that wasn't the only only offering. Bringing in Harvard Managemental was also a risk, because that would be an expense, because there's no way that we can charge back people for using the online content. So it's basically an expense that we have. So that was a bit of a risk. But I started with the pilot again. And then we saw that it was being successful, and then I started getting more visibility into the different organizations through our HR business partner community for the so for the content and for the system itself, and then by virtue of the accumulation of people doubling almost year after year, it kind of sold itself. So I didn't have to do a lot of justification. It was just more small steps towards the end goal of proving that we identified the right skill gap, we identified the right solution to meet those gaps with training, then with the pilot and feedback, and then putting it out there to a broader audience and seeing how they were taking it up and what the evaluations were in terms of the success from their point of view of going through the class. So it was kind of a multi-step process, but bit by bit, step by step.
What, if anything, would you do differently?
I think probably, well, with this virtual training, we actually started as a classroom-based training, and that was kind of we didn't get the numbers as we would like to have gotten, but and we didn't get as much feedback. We would have wanted more broader feedback. I think when we would engage with a vendor for a need to scale a certain training or learning opportunity, I would just go virtual immediately and pilot it from a virtual perspective. So not even go to the classroom base, just go right to virtual. That would be one thing. Another thing probably would be doing more marketing, but it's difficult for an HR learning organization to have a constant marketing campaign. We're still learning how to do that, I think, little by little. We are. So, for example, one thing that we tried, which seemed to be successful, that through our own internal website, we completely redesigned it from that first time. We have a newsletter that right on our homepage, we ask people to voluntarily opt in. And once a month, out of our training organization, we put out a newsletter to those who signed up for it to give, or to advertise, if you will, or marketing the current offerings. In other words, classes with seats available, which means it's not just enough to see a class, but to know that when you click on it, you'll actually get in because there are things. And also doing campaigns every time we do a new online learning offering, etc. So I think we've learned over time to just be better marketers and to really pick the right venue first at the onset.
Do you find that the needs and expectations of millennials for training is much different than it would be for other employees?
Yes, definitely. And that's where that whole revelation that I had going to that forum about effortless accessibility comes in. It's really that notion, that concept of trying to make it effortless, because we're in such a digital age where, I guess you call digital natives for lack of a better phrase. People are comfortable with that, with getting what they need when they need it, and to consume it as quickly as possible and as best as they possibly can. So we're starting to think about how we now design, or looking at even working with vendors to create these notions of effortless consumability and effortless accessibility. And the other thing, interestingly enough, about millennials is what I also learned also from this seminar, which I'm now thinking about from a career development offering, is that what millennials look at is not so much looking to learn just for the tasks that they need to do, but they're looking to learn to keep them, to make them more, to increase their employability, whether it's with the company that they work for now or where they're going to go to. We can't expect anybody to stay within any organization for any length of time if we know that they can be challenged, if people know that they're going to be challenged somewhere else and they're going to be even more employable by maybe going somewhere else. By giving them the access to a lot of growth and development and career development and skills that don't just pertain to what we need them to do, but to increase their employability over their career, I think that we get to retain them more because they get the value. Just like Rick had that quote from the Gallup poll in the very, very beginning, growth and development, that what that translates to is their own employability. And hopefully we get the benefit of others, millennials from other companies who've gotten some really good career development who come to us, because then we get those that things. So we have to let go of the notion that we're training just to keep them to do what they need to do. I think what we do is we offer them what they feel like they want that will help them in their careers, and then I think we get to see they get to see the benefits of staying within our organization because of that.
John, why don't we do one more if we have one more question?
Yeah, we have one more. What is the ongoing investment to maintain this system?
Well, by system, I guess we would need to be specific. So our learning management system, that's sort of our core foundational system. It's an enterprise system. Actually, the way that works in our company is that our IT organization is the system owner, so that they basically they're accountable for keeping the licensing going. So we don't really have cost, if you will, for the learning management system because it is an enterprise system. We do have our own subsystems, if you will. We sort of we took the original homegrown learning management system, and we've actually turned it into a notification and reporting system. In other words, doing better than what our LMS vendor can do outboard. So that investment is really just in one of my employees who is a programmer, an amazing guy who not only maintains it, but really sort of has a platform to build more capability on top of it. Now, in terms of our online resource library, like Harvard Managed Mentor and OnPoints, working in a matrix online, because we're a chargeback organization, what we actually do is we have an up the train for the classroom training. So we pay the vendor, but we make a bit of a profit cushion, if you will, and we use that money to invest in the online offering so that we can make it free and accessible to the company.
Great. All right. Once again, Harry, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you sharing sort of your story, the challenges. I think the folks had an opportunity to really hear what it takes to make something like this successful. So thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. And everyone, thank you very much for joining. We hope to see you at our next session. So again, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great holiday as well. All right. Bye, everyone.